The galaxy was restless the night the signal arrived. In the great chambers of the Galactic Council, alien voices argued in dozens of languages, their words carried across glowing translator fields. The chamber itself was a cathedral of power, a place where the most advanced civilizations gathered to shape the fate of thousands of worlds. And yet, that night, the discussion was not about trade, war, or alliances. It was about a message that had come from a small blue world on the edge of a spiral arm. The world was called Earth. The species was called human. The words they sent shook the silence of space. The transmission was simple. No long speech, no diplomacy, no endless declarations like the Council was used to. It was a cold voice, translated from human tongue into the universal code. Do not interfere with Earth. This is your only chance. That was all. It's a warning, a threat, a promise. It repeated once, then the signal cut to static, leaving the galaxy staring at the empty space it left behind. For hours, ships, stations, and listening posts replayed the message, scanning for hidden meanings, codes, or traps. But there was nothing more. Just that simple warning. The chamber filled with laughter at first. The proud empires of the galaxy were not used to being threatened. They were used to being begged. For centuries, weaker species crawled to them, asking for protection, trade, or mercy. But never had a species dared to send a warning like this, especially not a species as young as humanity. One of the counselors, a towering reptilian from the Dracari Dominion, slammed his clawed fist on the stone table and hissed, "They dare speak to us like this? A primitive race? Species barely 2 centuries into spaceflight?" His voice dripped with contempt as he looked around the chamber. We should erase them now, before they embarrass themselves further. Others joined the laughter, sneers. Spreading across alien faces, the Viari, who prided themselves as masters of the stars, mocked the humans as nothing more than ambitious primates. The Serac Alliance, with fleets that stretched across 20 systems, spoke of humanity as insects who had learned to build ships, but not to bow. Only a few counselors stayed quiet, their eyes dark with unease. They replayed the signal in their minds, not laughing at its simplicity, but unsettled by it. Warnings like that were not made by fools. Warnings like that came from those who knew their power. A lone voice spoke from the shadows of the chamber. Ambassador Terra of the Cathari stood, her slender form wrapped in silver robes. She had studied humans longer than most, tracing their rise through intercepted signals and scattered reports. Her voice was calm, but heavy with caution. "They are not like other species," she said softly. "I have seen their wars. I have studied their history. When they warn, they mean it." The chamber grew still for a moment, some turning to listen, others shaking their heads dismissively. What could they do? The Dracari boomed, his teeth bared in a grin. "Our fleets could crush them in a single sweep. They cannot stand. Against the galaxy?" Ambassador Terra lowered her eyes. "Perhaps not, but perhaps they do not need to. Do not mistake silence for weakness." Her warning was ignored. The vote was called as it always was in the Council. The decision was made. With arrogance and laughter, humanity's warning would be dismissed. The Council would not bow to fear, especially not to an upstart species, but far beyond the shining halls of the Council. In the dark reaches of the Sol system, humanity was already moving. Deep beneath the oceans, factories forged war machines. In the deserts, massive hangars released fleets of ships cloaked in steel and fire. On the moon, rail cannons the size of cities were powered, their barrels pointed at the sky.
Ow.
And in orbit around Earth, a silent fleet gathered, every hull marked with a single emblem, a blue world crossed by a sword of fire. Humanity had sent its warning, but it had not waited for the answer. It already knew what the galaxy would choose. For weeks, reports reached the Council of Human Activity. Listening posts near Sol spoke of strange energy readings. Fleets vanishing into the void without explanation, signals that could not be decrypted. A small scout ship belonging to the Viari entered human space, ignoring the warning. It vanished. Without a trace, another went dark days later, sending only a fragment of a scream across the stars before its signal was cut. Still, the council laughed. Still they mocked. Still they believed themselves untouchable. In the night skies of Earth, lights streaked across the horizon as fleets departed. Families gathered on rooftops to watch them ascend, silent but proud, their faces lit by the fire of engines that burned against the dark. The people of Earth had heard the council's laughter. They had seen the arrogant debates of the empires, and they knew what must come. They were not sending their fleets to fight for survival. They were sending them to teach a lesson. The galaxy thought humanity's signal was a bluff. They thought the warning was just words, empty and desperate. But to humanity, it was never a bluff. It was a promise written in steel, fire, and blood. And in the silence after the warning, as the first human fleets vanished into deep space, a new truth began to settle over the stars. The galaxy had ignored Earth's words. Now they would learn Earth's will. The galactic council chamber glittered with light from 1,000 hovering crystals, each casting shifting colors across the walls carved with the history of empires. Sitters from across the spiral arms sat in their floating thrones, their voices rising in waves of pride and arrogance. Humanity's signal had been played again and again, echoing through the chamber, but now it was only fuel for mockery. The council, in all its ancient confidence, decided that Earth's words were nothing more than the bark of a young predator trying to sound larger than it was. Grand. Chancellor Vareth of the Veari Empire leaned forward in her seat, her tall, thin frame gleaming with silver scales. Her voice carried across the chamber, sharp and amused. "The humans send a threat," she said with a smirk, "and yet they hide in their small corner of space. They are clever, perhaps, but they are nothing compared to us. They cannot match the power of the council." Applause broke out among her allies, the sound ringing like thunder through the room. Lord General. Yes. Exer of the Drakari Dominion slammed his claw against the arm of his throne, sparks flying from the impact. "We should not waste time with their games. They send threats, and we will send fleets. We will tear apart their fragile world, scatter their people, and make them slaves to our will. Let all young species know what happens when they dare. Stand against the might of the council." His words brought roars of approval from the Drakari seats, their reptilian jaws snapping in anticipation of war. But among the sea of voices, there were still some who shifted uneasily. Ambassador Terra of the Kethari kept her hands folded, her golden eyes locked on the projection of Earth spinning in the center of the chamber. She had warned them once, but now her voice was drowned in arrogance. She remembered the words of the human warning, short, cold, and without the softness of diplomacy. Warnings like that were not born of weakness. They were born of certainty. Yet every attempt to speak was crushed beneath the laughter of the powerful. News spread across the galaxy of the Council's decision. On worlds under their control, civilians cheered the bold stance against humanity. The empires boasted to their people that humans would soon be humbled, that their fleets would sweep across Sol and burn the Earth until nothing remained. The young species that had dared to speak with defiance would be reduced to ash, a warning to others. Entire holovids were created showing the expected human defeat, with actors portraying humans as panicked,
helpless
primitives, crushed beneath alien armies. Still, strange whispers began to creep into the cracks of the Empire's certainty. The Veari scout ship that had gone missing inside human space had not been recovered. The Serok fleet that tried to cross a human-controlled sector had sent one brief distress call before vanishing. The signal was only 2 words, cut with static. "They're here," then silence. But these reports were dismissed, brushed aside as mistakes or mechanical failures. After all, what else could it be? Surely humans lacked the technology to erase entire ships without leaving debris. Surely, behind closed doors. Though fear began to stir. Generals demanded more information. Scientists searched human transmissions for hidden codes. And spies were sent to Wardsol. Few returned, and those that did brought back words that unsettled even the proudest empires. They spoke of human fleets moving in silence, engines burning cold to avoid detection. They spoke of massive weapons hidden in asteroid belts, factories running day and night on every continent of Earth. They spoke of a people preparing, not begging. But these warnings were not enough to break the Council's arrogance. The great powers of the galaxy had ruled for too long, crushed too many rivals, and silenced too many rebellions. They believed themselves unshakable. Humanity, they decided, was simply the next challenger to be erased. The Council voted to assemble a combined armada, a fleet of such size that no species had dared oppose it in centuries. Thousands of ships were summoned from across the stars. Gathering in orbit around the shining world of Caltharis, the Council's seat of power. From space, the sight was awe-inspiring rows upon rows of warships stretching beyond sight. Carriers the size of mountains, dreadnoughts bristling with weapons powerful enough to level cities with a single shot. The fleet was called the Hand of the Council, and it was said that no power in the galaxy could stand against it. Citizens watched the armada assemble with pride, believing that humanity would soon be crushed. News programs broadcast endless parades of warships preparing for battle. On dozens of worlds, people cheered as the fleet prepared to march into Sol and end the human threat forever. The arrogance of the galaxy was at its height, a storm of pride and laughter that drowned out every whisper of fear. But far away, in the silence of deep space, humanity watched. Their fleets did not move openly. Their armies did not march in parades. Instead, their ships vanished into the void one by one, sliding into shadows where no Council eyes could see. Their weapons stayed cold, waiting for the right moment. As the Council's fleet grew louder, humanity grew quieter, their silence deeper, their patience unshaken. For arrogance was loud, but humanity's warning had never been loud. It had been quiet, cold, certain, and when the galaxy ignored it, the price was already set. The Council's armada was a thing of spectacle. Thousands of ships, blazing with power, lined like blades across the stars. But while the galaxy watched them gather, another force moved in silence. Humanity's fleet did not rise from parades or fanfares. It emerged from the dark places of space where no Council eyes looked. Each vessel sliding free of hidden docks carved into asteroids, moons, and forgotten stations. There were no speeches, no cheers. Only the hum of engines brought to life and the steady rhythm of soldiers boarding ships, their faces grim, their voices quiet. Unlike the alien fleets, humanity's warships carried no banners and no glowing insignias. Their hulls were painted in dark composites that swallowed starlight, their shapes sharp and predatory. Each vessel was a weapon, stripped of vanity, built for the single purpose of destruction. They did not move in neat formations that could be tracked from across systems. Instead, they slipped into the void one by one, vanishing from sensors, leaving only the faint ripple of distortion behind. Entire armadas disappeared into silence, moving like predators across an endless hunt. On Earth, cities burned with light as industry roared without pause. Factories pushed out endless streams of ammunition and starship parts. Massive war machines rolled from assembly lines, loaded into carriers, and launched toward orbital docks. Civilian populations were silent, but their silence was not born of fear. It was unity, a grim understanding that humanity had given the galaxy a chance. The warning had been spoken. There was no turning back. Every man, woman, and child knew what was coming, and they prepared not with panic, but with determination. The alien spies that slipped into human territory tried to capture glimpses of this rising storm. Few returned. Those who did brought reports that contradicted everything the Council wanted to believe. They spoke of entire continents given over to weapons production, of orbital rings armed with cannons so massive they dwarfed Council dreadnoughts. They spoke of fleets training. In silence, their maneuvers so precise and rehearsed that even veteran officers admitted fear. They spoke of human soldiers whose eyes held no hesitation, only the cold clarity of those who knew they would not stop until the war was ended. The Council dismissed these reports, calling them exaggerations, the inventions of spies who had been tricked by human propaganda. But behind closed doors, cracks began to show. Some admirals whispered that the silence was unnatural. Why had humanity not scrambled to negotiate when threatened? Why did they not beg for peace, or send envoys, or attempt diplomacy? Why did they simply vanish into the void? Pride demanded that these questions be ignored, but unease lingered in the hearts of even the proudest generals. Deep in the dark edges of space, the first human fleet took its place. They did not announce themselves. They did not broadcast signals or demand recognition. They simply appeared in silence, surrounding a council listening post in the farthest arm of the galaxy. The outpost never sent a distress call. One moment it was there, the next, only debris drifted in the cold vacuum. The council blamed pirates, but the pattern began to grow. Another outpost, then a convoy, and an entire patrol fleet vanished. Not destroyed in the way the council expected with wreckage, signals, cries for help, simply gone as if erased. This was humanity's strategy, crafted not from arrogance, but from calculation. They did not strike openly where the galaxy could rally against them. They cut carefully, quietly, piece by piece, leaving the council to wonder what force had slipped beneath their notice. Every disappearance sowed more doubt. Every silence made the mighty powers of the galaxy question their strength. The council's massive armada stood assembled. But it was a blunt weapon, waiting for a target that refused to show itself. On Earth, the War Council met in a chamber hidden beneath the old cities. The room was dark, the only light cast by holographic projections of enemy fleets, territories, and trade lines. Generals spoke in low tones, their voices calm, their plans unfolding like a predator mapping its prey. The human strategy was not simply to fight, it was to make the galaxy break itself. Under its own arrogance, to pull the threads until the entire council unraveled. "We warned them," one admiral said quietly, his hand resting against the projection of the council fleet. "They didn't listen. They never do," another replied.
But when
the storm comes, they will remember who gave them the chance to walk away. In silence, the plan moved forward. Fleets were dispatched not to strike the heart, but to choke the artery supply lines, fuel stations, trade hubs. Humanity would not fight the galaxy head-on. They would bleed it slowly, turning its pride into panic. And when the time came, when the council's arrogance had twisted into desperation, humanity's full force would fall upon them like a hammer from the dark. The galaxy had ignored the warning. The silent fleet waited in the shadows, patient, cold, unyielding, and unwielding. And in the endless black of space, silence was far more terrifying than any roar. The galaxy believed humanity would wait. They thought Earth would sit in its small corner of the stars, building weapons and whispering threats, but too afraid to truly act against powers that had ruled for thousands of years. The council's admirals convinced themselves that the human fleets were nothing more than a rumor, exaggerated by spies and frightened traitors. They told each other stories about how humanity had no experience in great wars, how their strength was only in words, not in deeds. They clung to this belief because the alternative that the warning had been real was too heavy to accept. But then the silence broke. It happened on the edge of a trade corridor that stretched across 8 systems. A convoy of over 70 council cargo ships, escorted by frigates and destroyers, moved between stars under heavy guard. The council had made a point of securing these routes, knowing that without food, fuel, and supplies, their fleets would collapse under their own weight. The convoy's commanders were confident. They had warships bristling with weapons, patrol drones scanning the dark, and beacons transmitting across the void. No pirate band or rebel faction could possibly touch them. The first human strike came not with a shout, but with a whisper. A single council frigate in the vanguard went silent, its lights fading, its engines dying. No explosion, no gunfire, just sudden stillness as it drifted powerless into the dark. Seconds later, another ship fell silent, then another. Confusion spread among the escorts as their sensors struggled to track the source. Their comms burst with static, their detection arrays blinded by interference that spread like an invisible fog. They fired blindly into the void, lighting the black with bursts of plasma. But there was nothing to hit. And then the human ships revealed themselves. They came not in formation, but in shadows, black holes sliding out of the void. Their weapons, already locked, kinetic slugs, invisible until impact, tore through Council warships like paper. Missile barrages erupted in silence, crossing the gap in seconds before shredding engines, cracking holes and detonating fuel lines. The escorts never had a chance to coordinate. Every time they tried to regroup, the jamming crushed their signals, leaving them isolated and blind. The humans did not waste shots. Every volley was calculated, precise, merciless. Within minutes, half the escort fleet was gone. The rest scattered, abandoning the convoy in panic. The cargo vessels tried to flee, but they were slow and heavy. Humanity had no mercy for them. Boarding ships latched onto their hulls, cutting through armor, flooding corridors with armored soldiers who moved with cold precision. Entire crews were captured, their ships stripped of cargo, their systems shut down. No distress calls ever left the system. The Council would not learn of this battle until wreckage drifted into the trade lanes days later, silent testimony to the scale of the slaughter. On the bridge of the human flagship, Admiral Reyes stood silent as the reports came in. The man's face was carved from stone, his eyes fixed on the holographic map of the convoy's collapse. Around him, officers relayed numbers casualties, ships secured, cargo seized. Not once did he smile, not once did he boast. He only nodded, his voice steady as he gave the next command. Burn the wrecks, leave nothing useful behind, then vanish. The human fleet did not linger. They erased the convoy, took what they needed, and then disappeared back into the silence. By the time Council reinforcements arrived, there was nothing left but fragments and fire. The news hit the Council like a blade to the heart. For the first time, they had to face the truth. Humanity had not been bluffing. They were not a nuisance. They were not a minor power. They had cut a fully armed convoy from existence, and they had done it with such precision that no warning had been sounded. No survivors had escaped. Panic began to stir behind the polished walls of the Council chambers. Some demanded retaliation. An immediate strike on Earth to crush the humans before they grew stronger. Others argued that they needed to regroup, to understand how humanity had moved unseen and struck with such force. But even as they argued, more reports trickled in. Another patrol fleet gone, a listening post silenced, a supply station abandoned, its crew vanished. The humans were striking everywhere at once, yet leaving no trace of how they moved for humanity. This was only the beginning. The first strike was not meant to win the war. It was meant to send a message. The warning had been ignored, so now the galaxy would feel the weight of what it had dismissed. Every destroyed convoy, every lost ship, every silence in the stars was a reminder. The humans had promised annihilation, and they were making good on it. On Earth, the people watched the broadcasts with quiet resolve. There were no celebrations. No one cheered at the news of victories. Instead, there was only the knowledge that the war had begun, and that it would not end until the galaxy bent or broke in the cold void between stars. Humanity's fleets vanished once again into the dark. Their ships carried no flags there. Soldiers, no songs. The only sign they left behind was silence. And silence now was more terrifying than any roar of war. The galaxy had thought the humans weak. Now, with their first strike, humanity had shown the truth. They were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting to finish what they had started the moment their warning was ignored, and the galaxy had no idea how much worse it was about to get. The Council had been humiliated. Their convoys slaughtered, their fleets ambushed, their supply lines torn apart by an enemy they had once dismissed as unworthy of notice. What made it worse was the silence. Humanity did not broadcast their victories, did not issue threats after each strike. They simply acted, leaving wreckage and vanishing into the void. The galaxy's great powers, who had survived countless wars, found themselves shaken in ways they had never been before. The question whispered in every chamber of power was the same. If the humans could strike so easily, who would be next? The answer came with a roar. The Council assembled the largest retaliatory fleet in living memory. Nearly 1,000 ships, dreadnoughts, carriers, frigates, and swarms of drones were gathered under the command of High Admiral Varen, war hero who had crushed rebellions on 3 different worlds. The Council broadcast their preparations across the galaxy, making sure every species knew they would not bow to Earth's threats. This was meant to be more than a military strike. It was meant to be a display of dominance, a warning to all who might side with humanity. The fleet's target was not Earth itself, but one of its frontier colonies, a world called New Carthage, located on the edge of human-controlled space. It was lightly defended, with only a handful of orbital platforms and a small garrison of Marines. The Council believed it would fall within hours, giving them a swift, symbolic victory to erase their shame. Their intelligence, said human fleets, were concentrated near Earth, leaving their colonies vulnerable. To the admirals, it seemed the perfect move, but humanity had been expecting this. When the Council fleet arrived, New Carthage appeared quiet, almost too quiet. The orbital platforms did not open fire. The civilian channels were silent. It looked, at first glance, abandoned. High Admiral Varen gave the order to descend, confident the humans had already fled. His fleet spread out, dropships preparing to land, troops ready to occupy the cities. That was when the trap closed. The silence of the planet was not surrendered, it was bait. Hidden beneath the surface of New Carthage, buried deep in its oceans and concealed in its moons, were entire arsenals of human weapons. Missile silos rose out of the ground, launching volleys that cut through the first wave of Council ships. Massive railguns hidden in mountain ranges lit up the void, firing rounds at near-light speed, each impact tearing through shields as if they weren't there. Orbital platforms that had pretended to be powerless suddenly roared to life, unleashing storms of plasma fire that tore into the Council's formations. But the deadliest blow came not from the planet, but from the dark beyond. Human fleets emerged. From the black-like predators waiting for the kill, they had hidden their ships in deep space, engines cold, cloaked by interference fields that made them indistinguishable from drifting asteroids. As the Council focused on New Carthage, those fleets came alive, striking from behind. Dozens of human warships cut into the Council's rear lines, shattering carriers and slicing through the drone swarms before the enemy even realized they were there. Chaos erupted. The Council fleet had numbers, but humanity had preparation. Move of the retaliation had been anticipated. Every attack had been foreseen. The admirals shouted commands, but jamming signals drowned out their voices. Ships tried to regroup, only to run headfirst into ambushes. Dreadnoughts turned their massive guns on the planet, desperate to silence its defenses. But railgun rounds punctured their hulls before they could fire. High Admiral, Varen watched in disbelief as his armada disintegrated around him. What was supposed to be a demonstration of power had become a slaughter. He ordered a full retreat, but the human fleets had already cut off the exits. Ships that tried to jump too faster than light corridors were hunted down, their drives disabled by precision strikes. Entire squadrons were annihilated before they could even turn. The humans did not stop until the last Council ship was crippled or destroyed. When it was over, the wreckage of one of the largest fleets in galactic history drifted silent in orbit above New Carthage. Thousands of Council soldiers were dead. Thousands more were prisoners, their dropships captured before they could touch the ground. The scale of the defeat was beyond anything the Council had suffered in centuries, and humanity was not finished. Admiral Reyes broadcast the aftermath to every corner of the galaxy. For the first time, humanity's voice was heard again, not through warnings, but through proof. The footage showed the wreckage of the mighty Council fleet. The burning hulks of dreadnoughts, the captured soldiers marched in silence. His voice was calm, steady, stripped of any hint of arrogance. You ignored our warning. You chose this war. And now you see its cost. If you continue, it will not end with fleets. It will not end with colonies. It will end with your empires, your capitals, your very species. This is not revenge. This is survival. Humanity will not stop. The broadcast ended, and silence followed. For the first time, the galaxy understood the scale of the mistake they had made this was not a species they could intimidate or outnumber. This was an enemy who planned, who prepared, who struck with precision and vanished before they could be touched. The Council had thrown its greatest fleet into the fire. Humanity had burned it to ash. Whispers spread from world to world. Some species, long resentful of the Council's dominance, began to see humanity not as a threat, but as a chance of power that could topple the old order. Others trembled, realizing that if the humans could annihilate a fleet that size, then no empire was safe. But for the Council, there was only fear and rage. Their pride had been shattered. Their fleets had been gutted. And yet, instead of backing down, they began to plot something far darker. If humanity would not bow, then they would unleash the kind of destruction that no one could survive. The retaliation had failed. And now the war was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. The galaxy had expected humanity to retaliate. But what came after the fall of the Council's Grand Fleet was not retaliation. It was annihilation. Humanity had been holding back, striking only with precision, choosing only military targets. But once the Council made its move to escalate beyond war, to unleash weapons of mass extermination, the humans changed their rules. The restraint was gone. What followed was not a war between equals, but a storm sweeping across empires. Council, humiliated and desperate, had authorized something unthinkable. In their hidden armories, they kept forbidden weapons, biological plagues, and stellar disruptors. They planned to burn entire human colonies, not just defeat their fleets, but erase their people. That decision sealed their fate. Humanity intercepted fragments of the Council's communications. They saw the outlines of the plan, the talk of total eradication of human worlds. For humanity, that was the line crossed. Admiral Reyes stood in the command center of the Horizon Spear, eyes locked on the incoming reports. His officers read them aloud: convoys carrying bioweapons, dreadnoughts carrying devices meant to collapse suns, fleets moving toward human colonies. Reyes didn't shout. He didn't rage. His voice was cold, steady, final. They wanted extermination. Now we answer in kind. No mercy. The orders went out. Across human space, fleets that had been silent surged forward. They didn't strike colonies, didn't target civilians. Humanity had no interest in slaughtering the weak. Instead, they aimed at the heart of power, the Council's capitals, their shipyards, their fuel depots, their command networks. And when the first strike hit, the galaxy trembled. The Council world of Valen was a jewel, home to its nobility and senators. Its skies had never known bombardment, its cities never fire. That changed in an instant. Human stealth fleets pierced its defenses, bypassed its orbital rings, and dropped payloads that turned its military complexes into craters. Their capital tower, the seat of Council power for centuries, cracked in two under the impact of tungsten rods dropped from orbit. The people of Valen screamed, but humanity did not touch their homes, did not slaughter their streets. They went after power alone, stripping the Council of its ability to command. Then came Kazor Prime, the heart of the war industry. Its shipyards stretched across half a planet, producing dreadnoughts faster than any other world. The humans did not invade. They didn't waste fleets on sieges. Instead, they unleashed precision weapons that tore the orbital stations apart, chain reactions igniting in the vacuum. Half-finished warships drifted helplessly, their skeletons glowing red as explosions devoured them. Millions of tons of steel became twisted wreckage in a single night. World after world fell not to invasion, but to erasure of infrastructure. Fuel depots went dark, communication hubs were sliced apart, armories detonated, and still, humanity broadcast nothing, no demands, no negotiations. Only silence and the thunder of destruction. The galaxy watched in horror. For centuries, wars had been fought with rules, with limits, with treaties that even enemies obeyed. Humanity ignored them all. They didn't fight for territory, didn't fight for dominance. They fought to end the enemy's ability to fight forever. Refugees poured into neutral zones. Speaking of skies torn open by human weapons, of fleets appearing from nowhere, striking with surgical precision and vanishing before anyone could respond. Some species begged their leaders to sue for peace before humanity came for them next. Others clung to the council, swearing vengeance even as their fleets crumbled. But whispers began to spread. The council was already dead. They just hadn't realized it yet. In the council chambers, panic reigned. Senators shouted. Admirals begged for reinforcements that no longer existed. Leaders demanded explanations. No one could give. The High Chancellor, once proud and unshakable, now sat silent, his face pale, his hands trembling. Every day brought new reports of human strikes. Every night brought the silence of another world cut off. The final blow came. When the humans revealed their last card, they had not only destroyed fleets and shipyards, they had infiltrated the Council's own command networks. When the Council gathered their remaining fleets for one last stand, humanity triggered the sabotage. Engines failed. Weapons refused to fire. Entire ships turned on each other, hijacked by viruses planted months ago. By the time the humans revealed their fleet, the Council's last hope was already collapsing from within. The battle wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Admiral Reyes watched from the bridge, silent as the Council's dreadnoughts fell one by one. His officers didn't cheer. There was no triumph, only grim duty. Humanity had warned them. The Council hadn't listened. Now, the war was ending exactly as humanity had promised, with fire and silence. When it was over, the stars around the Council's final stronghold were filled with wreckage. The humans broadcast one final message, not to the Council because there was no Council left, but to the galaxy. Humanity will not be erased. Remember this. We did not start this war, but we ended it. And if any empire ever seeks our extinction, again, they will face the same end. This is our last warning. No mercy. And then the channel went dead. For centuries to come, the galaxy would tell stories of the war, of how a species once ignored, once dismissed as weak, had brought empires to their knees. They would tell of the warnings, ignored until it was too late. They would tell of fleets burning, of worlds stripped of power, of leaders silenced, and above all, they would tell of humanity's cold promise spoken once and never forgotten. No mercy.